Hi everyone, EJ Lister here. Testing out a new product here from TechSmith, Camtasia. It's a free trial version for capturing screens, creating videos. I thought maybe I would test it out. This is a version that will have a watermark on it, but I thought I would give it a try for future opportunities to record my Primavera lessons. So I'm going to give it a bit of a test here, and maybe you guys can give me a bit of feedback what you think. I'm going to use it for just a short video here to explain to you what I want to refer to in terms of WBS, work breakdown structure in Primavera. In relation to process availability, I'm also going to talk a little bit about how we create dynamic scheduling, windows of opportunity, dynamic execution management, a little bit around the potential work when we talk about discovery work and doing our planning, where we want to be able to identify clearly on our Gantt chart whether we have the potential to have some repair work or whether this work could just be normal. When it's normal, it's the green. You'll see the green bar. When we have potential work, it turns to cayenne color bar. What this does is it gives us an opportunity to see the potential work that we might have for repairs. We can take it in, we can take it out, we can run our different scenarios based on this information. So I want to show you a little bit about that, but most importantly, I'd like to talk to you about something that I'm really passionate about in terms of Primavera and terminology, project management and scheduling. I know many of you are really excited about turnarounds and doing scheduling and Primavera. Unfortunately, many of you who are scheduling, you're using the wrong terminology and you're relating too many of your methodologies or scheduling techniques to what you learned in PMP or project management, which has absolutely nothing to do with shutdowns, turnarounds, outages, and pitSTOps. Let me just back up a little bit. We're talking about stops, and we call them stops. It's an acronym for when we have to reduce production on a manufacturing facility in order to clean and repair or maintain physical assets, either for compliance or for cleaning. So the quick definition, shutdown is a scheduled or unscheduled event for process integrity. For example, for cleaning or for catalyst replacement and filters, example. It's not regulatory. It can be done at any level of the asset management systemization, the flock. It could be done at a plant, a train, a system, or even at an asset. If we foul up a exchanger, for example, we need to shut it down. The turnaround is always scheduled, and it's scheduled for asset integrity, for compliance, for the ability to legally operate, whether it's for insurance reasons or for regulatory government regulations. Asset integrity. So this is the things to do with the structure around pressure vessels, for example, piping, pressure safety valves. And the turnaround has its own expenditure, own budget. Shutdowns might be part of an OPEX budget. They might even be part of a CAPEX budget, or they might be part of the turnaround budget. So the O stands for outage, and an outage is related to maintenance. So it's always related either to a CAPEX or an OPEX budget. It does not fall into the turnaround or shutdown budgets. And the outage refers to overhauls or maintenance that we need to perform on equipment or physical assets, production assets that need to be taken out of service to perform this work, and we lose or reduce production as a result of that. So if I take a spared equipment out of service to perform an overhaul, it's really not an outage. It's more related to the day-to-day maintenance, corrective maintenance or preventive maintenance overhauls. So keep that in mind. STO, shutdown, turnaround, outage. Outages can be scheduled or unscheduled events under the maintenance umbrella under OPEX. A pit stop is something that we refer to in terms of the ability to bundle or create a tranche of activities related to shutdowns, turnarounds, and outages that we can perform on a system or a piece of a subsystem or a unit or a train or an entire plant if we desire. It's a short burst of activities that we'll perform, of work orders under the shutdown, turnaround, outage umbrella to relieve the amount of work scope that we might have on a typical turnaround event on a 3-year or 4-year cycle. So keep in mind that over a 5 or 10 or 15 year plan in a typical manufacturing facility, if I am going to take major turnarounds versus doing some pit stops in between, provided I'm not operating a single line facility where I lose all of my production, if I have an opportunity to just reduce a bit of production in order to do a pit stop, I could save 1 to 3% of my overall production over 5 or 10 years, which amounts to millions of dollars in production. Well, at the same time, I maintain my facility, the integrity and the process and assets, and I maintain the ability to reduce some of that turnaround and shutdown scope. So here's the big thing I'm going to talk about today. WBS, going back to your terminology, there are things in the turnaround or a stop that we don't do as opposed to an EPC project or typical project management project, things like building manufacturing facilities or plants or hospitals or bridges, roads. We don't use certain terminology. WBS is the one thing we don't use in a turnaround. That is a construction terminology. So we don't use WBS. We use what we call asset management systemization. It's a vertical hierarchy which mirrors the CMMS ERP asset register, or the FLOC, the functional location. WBS, like I said, is used for construction projects. In addition to the AMS, or the asset management systemization, which is structured from the operating facility from either plants, units, trains, systems, and it is a vertical hierarchy all the way down to physical assets or lines. What we're going to talk about here is process availability. These are the windows that are created for establishing the handover from process operations to maintenance and the turnover back to process operations during each stop event. And this is done in a phased or a process availability horizontal timeline, which is something you can't do in Primavera. Primavera was not designed for stops. It's designed for building bridges and hospitals and plants and major projects. In a stop event, we need a way to establish that physical horizontal timeline and windows of opportunity. And it doesn't have that capability, but there's a workaround. This is what I'm going to show you on this lesson. So also, one other note, use ordinal numbering for days for stops. Example, day 1, day 2, day 3. So I'm going to look at a flare system here in P6 that is going to be available for maintenance from day 14 to day 24. Basically, maintenance or execution phase in a stop event. So let's go back to P6 and talk about under P6 Primavera. You'll see that we have something called WBS and a WBS structure. Again, I want you to forget about the WBS terminology and think more about how you can create something called an asset management systemization. And it's a representation of the FLOC, of the CMMS and ERP asset register functional locations. It's physical. It almost never changes from project to project because it is the physical asset. And there are 3 key fields that we want to utilize to push data back and forth between Oracle P6 and JD Edwards, for example, or SAP CMMS. And that is, number 1 is the asset ID or the equipment ID. The second one is the work order number, and the third one is cost center. They need to be synced up and lined up, and the only way to do that is to mirror how the system is set up. So here you're going to see that I've set up for plants, then I have units under plants, I have systems under units, I have my systems, and I could go right down into subsystems all the way down to an asset. Here I have a flare system, which I'm going to create process availability from day 14 to day 24, or from the 14th to the 24th. And so keep in mind asset management systemization. Try to think about that as you're going through this. So what I'm doing, and again, as I said in P6, does not allow me to hard code these. I can't say that this system is available from this day to this day and hard code this. I would have to put in milestones, for example, to be able to represent that. And even then, in P6, those milestones don't mean anything. They don't create a window of opportunity for me. And by the window of opportunity, I'm referring to this window. You'll see that I have the hash developed in here where I have, let me grab my system. I have a hatching here that is a curtain that's showing me from day 14 to day 24 that this flare system is available be worked on. And all the work assigned to the flare system is falling into that window of opportunity. Okay? And so this is what I want to talk to you about, is how did we create this? How did we create that window of opportunity? Even though this project, here's my shutdown phase, and the project is starting on the 1st of April. But the flare system, the operations said, I can give you the flare system on day 14, but I want it back on 24. And the reason for that is because they need the flare system to shut down. And by the time they get it cleaned and handed over, so again, we're talking about the handover from operations by system to maintenance, and then the turnover back to operations when it's finished. So they're saying, we'll give it to you on this day, but we want it back in time for startup on this day. So I need to create this window of opportunity. You'll see here that I have no relationships in these packages. I have only logic within the actual activities and packages. I have no milestones. I have open-ended activities. I have all these things that you've learned not to do because you learned about project management in construction field. And those are the things I need you to start forgetting about. Things like critical path. We don't use critical path in turnaround. We don't use baseline. We don't use WBS. There's all these radical things that I know drive you crazy and drive your managers crazy, but these are the things we need to start talking about. What am I referring to in regards to doing shutdowns, turnarounds, outages, pitSTOps versus versus what I'm referring to in stop events. Okay, so I really want you to pay attention to this and understand, how do we work around a P6, because it wasn't designed for doing stops. Okay, it's a great tool for EPC projects, but it wasn't designed for shutdowns. So let's get started. Okay, here's what we're going to do. In one of my lessons, I showed you that to create windows, we're using calendars, and I gave you this calendar, process availability calendar lesson. If you don't have it, you can always go to my website, www.stowenavigator.ca, and go to downloads, and you can download the lesson. You're going to see here that under my global calendars, I created what I call a template for the year 2022. And if you look at this template, you'll see that in 2022, not a single day is available to work. They are all non-work days. The entire year has no available work until the next year when I have 24 hours. Every day is blocked out. So I want you to create this as a template. This is a template that you're going to use to create your process availability windows. Then I go to my actual project, which I'm working on right now, and I can start to build my windows or process availability horizontal timelines, either by phase. For example, I can create an open phase, a shutdown phase, a closing phase, or I can do it by the ASM, or Asset Management Systemization, in this case, the flare system. And in the flare system, I'm saying that in 2022, in April, the only time that this flare system is available is from Thursday the 14th, or what I'm going to call day 14, to day 24. This is the window of opportunity that this work can be done. So what does that mean? That means that any activities that I assign to the flare system are going to be scheduled into this window of opportunity. Let's just change this particular activity to a 24-hour calendar for a moment, and you'll see that when I schedule this particular activity, will come all the way back to the start date, because in the 24-hour calendar, every day is available. So this activity's earliest start time will come all the way back into the shutdown phase. But I know that this activity belongs in the flare system. That's why I've created it. So I'm going to go back to my project calendars, and I'm going to create this flare system, and it's going to automatically put this back into this window. Okay, it can't go anywhere else. And you'll see that I have my float remaining. Here's the end of this period. I have no milestones. I have no relationships. I do have logic between the work order activities. So this is my task. Replace the flare system. This is a task, not an activity. The activities within the task use logic in order to execute these activities. So what am I going to do from here? Now that I have all my activities into this process, and these activities are set up as resource dependent, fixed duration and units per time, physical percent complete. And as I said, I do have some of them that are identified as potential. Remember when I say that if this was normal, it would come in as a normal green activity. If I put it in as potential, it's going to show up as potential work. It means I might do it, I might not do it, because it might be a repair. But I want to see the impact I want to see the impact of that on my plan. I also have my dynamic scheduling priority. I'm saying that this particular activity is a high priority. I could change this to priority 3 if I like. I also am using leveling priorities of normal, high, low, and I'm going to show you how this works when we get into leveling. Again, dynamic scheduling and dynamic execution management is what I want to show you here. I want the computer to produce the most optimized plan for me based on the resource availability and the priorities of these activities. So you'll see here that when I look at my activities, or at my resources, sorry, bear with me here, I'm going to just pull up the current resources. I'm going to look at my things like my P1s. So P1 resources, I have P1s, P2s, and P3s. P1s are the movie stars of my event. These are the people who own the activities. These are the key trades, like pipe fitters, welders, specialty welders, boiler makers. They're the ones who own these activities, and these are the ones I want to level and optimize. I want these people working all the time, and I want them optimized. But they need support. They need support by P2s. I don't resource level on P2s. And again, here's another comment about resource leveling. We don't level resources in STO projects or stops. It's just a term that P6 came up with, and it's a really poor term, because what we do is we schedule work and we let the computer do the scheduling based on the priorities or the programming that we put in as a scheduler. So there's 2 schedulers in the room. There's me, the human being, scheduling, static scheduling from level 1 to 3 schedule, and there's the computer doing the scheduling, dynamic scheduling from level 4 to level 5. Again, those are other lessons that we're going to talk about. So what I want you to look at here is that I have these pipe fitters that are working on a productivity factor of 65%. If you look here at this resource, you'll see here that I have them working as 1.4, 65% tool time, and you all know what the productivity factor in the non-productive time is for. I have fixed non-productive time and I have variable non-productive time. The fixed time goes for everyone on every wrench puller or every worker on site, direct worker, has to wait to get a permit, has to have safety meetings, has to have breaks and coffee breaks and wash up time. That time applies to everyone, and it's usually about 30% or 25 to 30% of their time that they can't be pulling wrenches. It's non-productive time, it's legitimate, but we still have to pay for it. It's not time that they can use to earn, but it's actual time that I have to pay for. I'm going to set up the number of units. I'm going to say I have 12, my crew of 12. Okay, so think about this as crew size. This is my crew of 12. So here I've identified them as the crew or the equipment and the available. So what am I doing? I'm trying to produce the most optimized plan with these resources within this flare system, for example. And you'll see here that I'm over allocated over this period of time, and I have quite a bit of float. What I want to be able to do is go in and say that I would like to build a plan. Okay, so remember, we don't produce a schedule, we produce a project plan. We schedule to produce the plan. In this case, the computer is doing the scheduling. I'm going to build it based on the pipe fitter, because the laborers and the scaffolders and the insulators, riggers, for example, those are P2s and they support my P1s, and I want, as a pool, I don't want to level on them. They need to show up when the P1s or the superstars come out of their dressing room and come up available for doing the critical work, like the welding, for example, and fitting up of equipment, of projects, activities. They need support. And I want to make sure that I've got plenty of support in P2s. My P3s are my indirects, and they don't belong as resources here. They go into level of effort overhead activities. We'll talk about that later on. So here I'm going to produce this plan. I'm going to base it on my activity leveling priority and then my dynamic scheduling priority. I'm going to preserve 24 hours of float. That means I'm going to keep 24 hours here just in case. So none of these activities are going to go critical or red. It's going to preserve that time. So I'm going to go ahead now and level this, and it's going to say that I adequately, with a productivity factor of 1.4, with all of these activities and the priorities, you can see that it produced a plan for me based on the priorities that I put in, Now here's priority 3. If I want to change this to a priority 1, I can change it on the fly. I can re-level. What it's going to do is it's going to bring that activity in, and it's going to push another activity out. And this is my entire goal, is to be able to identify what am I working on this particular day, where I'm going to earn value. What am I working on this particular, on this day, on this day? These are the things that I want to be able to identify, and I want to be able to quickly react to these changing conditions. So when I come into my, when I've come into my meeting from my war room sessions, and operations or the execution coordinators tell me that we want to change priorities on an activity because something all of a sudden became a priority and something else became a less priority. For example, this one went down to a priority 5. I can quickly modify that plan to create, and again, this is the dynamic scheduling, dynamic execution. I didn't have to go in there and relink or just, because you'll see I have no relationships between these packages. I have no milestones. I am just letting the computer produce the most optimized plan based on these availability of the people. Now let's say I went back and said that these pipe fitters are working on 6 days a week, 2 shifts, for example, and 100% productivity. So now you'll see here that they're not available on the Sunday. And I'm going to produce a new plan because I'm going to schedule and level up based on this. So now I've produced a new plan. I can still get all of this work done on that time frame. But let's say I reduce the number of people available, and I put this down to having only 12 of these resources available. Now I'm going to go ahead and level, and it's going to change things based on the availability of just having a crew of 12. So let me just pick up on the 12 flare system. So here you'll see that I have this crew of 12. Let me adjust my basing it. This is based on 24-hour because we went for 100%. I have a crew of 12 here, but they're not working. These people are not working on Sunday. But let's say now that the operators come back and say, hey, is there any way that I can have this flare system back a day early? And what we would do is say, yeah, let's just go in here to this calendar flare system. Let's modify it. Go to 2022 in April. And let's say that we can make these 2 days. Let's take 2 days off of it. No, working. Now, the only window of opportunity is to the 22nd or day 22. And I'm going to close this. I'm going to re-level again. Now you'll see here that I've just trimmed 2 days off. Now, everything when I level is still available to be done with this number of resources. Now, it doesn't mean that all the resources, I would still have to look at everyone available here. But with the people that I have available for the flare system, can quite easily get this work done. Now, let's say, for example, I add more work to this project. Some additional work comes in. I'm going to add more work here. What's going to happen? Well, obviously, it's going to start accumulating a bit more time. Now, let's say I go back and say, well, I'm not getting the productivity that I thought. I'm changing this to a productivity of 1.4. Go back to my develop a new plan, and perhaps I've changed this from a 9 to a priority 2. I've changed this one to a priority 1, and maybe I've made some of these the top priority, and this one I'll make a top priority. So really what I'm doing is I'm letting the computer produce the most optimized plan. Now you'll see here that I'm over allocated. I don't have enough to get this work done within this time frame, within this number of days. I'm going to run out of float, and I have too many people on front load. This is very front loaded. So I know that I need to go back in, and now I need to add more units to this. So I'm going to make this into 16. I'm going to make this 16 units. Put this price back to $37. I think they're worth $37. And go back and look at what happens now when I develop that schedule. Now I have a very respectable schedule that I have created an opportunity here to get all this work done within this window of time based on these priorities. And I'm doing it very dynamically, very quickly, and very accurately. So I can create any windows of opportunity. I can create an open phase, closure phase. I can quickly react to the changing conditions in the field. When I have my war room, execution coordinators, operators come in and tell me that things have changed out there. We need to change these priorities, or we're going to have to add some work. which means the scheduler now becomes a dynamic scheduler who is the key person on the project controls team and is driving and navigating this event. And when it comes to updating and looking at earned value, actual value, wrench time, it is such a no-brainer that I can start to track my CPI, SPI, my wrench time, and I can start driving this in real time. And that's the idea of dynamic scheduling methodology and dynamic execution management. It's a combined effort, a collaborative effort by project controls team. Scheduler is the king, is the driver, the pilot, and we want them to be able to utilize the power of Primavera and understand that we don't use WBS in here. Let me go back one more time and sum it all up for you, that do not consider work breakdown structure in a stop event. Okay, the stop event means it requires asset management, systemization, and operations might come to me and tell me that they have a particular system or subsystem where they need to isolate it for piping replacement, for example, that they're going to create systemization that we're going to add to this. But it is a timeline, a horizontal timeline, and I can go in and create those timeline opportunities. Okay, so I know this is a pretty quick lesson. I'm not sure how well it's going to work with my Camtasia, but I'm just hoping that I'll be able to share this with you. If you guys have any comments, by all means, let me know. I'm going to try to set up a formal training opportunities for lessons in a step-by-step kind of process. But I really I want you to start thinking about, hey, if you want to be a dynamic scheduler and make incredible amount of money and add huge value to a stop event, you got to get out of that mindset of project management and being an administrator scheduler and giving out 3-week look-aheads and not having open-ended activities and using critical path and using baseline, all that stuff that you want to unlearn. I need you to unlearn that if you want to be a dynamic scheduler in the stop environment. Okay, so I'm going to sign off here now, get back to you later. I appreciate you giving me some feedback and comments, and hey, it's only fair to share.